The prostate cancer has been a gut punch. I think it would have been less so if I was a bottom, but I'm not.
LGBTQs, and welcome back to another episode of A Jaded Gay. I'm Rob Lovelace, and today I am a non-jaded gay because I feel like I've finally come out of my summertime hibernation. I feel like throughout all of July, I was just kind of locked away in my house doing house projects and homework and preparing things for the podcast. And I really hadn't seen like any of my friends since the 4th of July. So last night I went out for a friend's birthday. It was great to see him and his boyfriend and a few of their friends. Today I'm having a few people over my house as well for a little wine night. So it'll be good to have some social time, especially after what feels like a summer of isolation. Anyway, from navigating isolation to navigating illness, today I am very excited to welcome a special guest who will be talking to us about health and navigating illness as a queer person. You know, we've talked in past episodes about how our health is really important, but unfortunately, not all queer people feel safe seeking medical treatment just because of the history of discrimination. So we're going to be diving into all of that, but before we do, you know the drill, let's pull our tarot card. So the card we drew today is the 5 of Cups. As you'll remember, Cups is tied to the element of water. It's feminine energy, so it's asking us to meditate and reflect. And Cups is tied to our emotions, which you can think of as flowing freely like water. In numerology, 5 is tied to change, instability, and loss, and it's sometimes referred to as the conflict card. And when we draw the 5 of Cups, it's signifying that we may be experiencing grief and sadness. And with this card's feminine energy, it's really important that we allow ourselves to feel this and let ourselves grieve. By taking the time to reflect on our sorrow, we can process these feelings and also understand what we need to move on. Do we need to forgive ourselves or forgive others? Do we need time to cry it out? Or do we need to plan a new path forward for ourselves? By asking these questions, we can deal with our grief and sadness in a healthy way without falling into the trap of excessive self-wallowing. And while our cup may be half empty now, it will be full again someday. Remember, no pain lasts forever, and there's always a way out of this. And with that in mind, I am very excited to welcome our special guest. Before we do, though, I would like to give a quick disclaimer. Obviously, we'll be talking about illness and medical treatment, but I'd just like to clarify that neither myself nor our special guest are medical experts. So don't take any of this as medical advice, and always consult your PCP or a licensed medical professional before making any medical decisions of your own. Anyway, getting right into it. He is the author of Glandscapes. Please welcome Mickie Kennedy. Hi, Mickie. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on today. I was just, we were talking before we started recording. You have an amazing, vibrant, colorful background, a beautiful built-in bookshelf, a blue painted fireplace with a very colorful wood block painting above it. So it looks like a very cozy recording spot you're in.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it is. I enjoy it. It's a little brightness.
Definitely need that. Well, as I touched upon in the intro, today we're going to be talking all about navigating health as a queer person. So I'm really excited for you to be on the show today. We'll be talking about your experiences navigating your health journey, also your book Glandscapes, which really is just, it's all, like you said before, it's all out there. So we're really going to get into the nitty gritty. And I think it's really important that we're not afraid to talk about the sensitive topics and really be authentic, because while it might be awkward or confusing, it's really helpful that, other people are probably experiencing it too. So our words and our experiences, publishing those and putting them out in the world can really help others. But I know I'm getting ahead of myself. So before we get into all that, I definitely want to turn it over to you. Can you introduce yourself to the listeners? Tell them all about you, background, pronouns, career, all that fun stuff.
Sure. So my name's Mickie Kennedy. My pronouns are he, him, and I live in Baltimore County, Maryland. I work in PR, but I've always had an interest in poetry. And 30 years ago, I got an MFA in creative writing with an emphasis in poetry, and then transitioned to work for 20-some years, and then started writing poetry again a few years ago.
And I like to ask all my guests, today, are you a jaded or non-jaded gay, and why?
I would say non-jaded. I'm pretty open. I'm pretty optimistic about our future. I see a lot of different members of the community that are writing and sharing different and new experiences. There's so much stuff coming out that's like needed in the trans world, especially, that I'm just so energized by. And I just appreciate all the new stuff that's out there coming, despite the political climate that we live in.
Definitely. It seems like in spite of that all, there is still so much more representation and more diverse, authentic representation that's coming out here. So no matter how loud people are yelling at us, we're not going away.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, let's dive right into it. You touched upon your career and your work writing poetry, getting your MFA. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey, both as a writer and as someone navigating prostate cancer, and how did those paths intersect?
So it's funny because I had colon cancer, I guess around, it'll be 8 years, in September. And that happened so suddenly. I was just very faint all the time. And I went to my doctor and she said, "Oh, you just have this blood pressure thing that when you stand up, your blood pressure plummets." And I was like, "Any blood work? No, we're good." And I was like, "Can I do anything about it?" She's like, "Nope." And then for 6 months, I just continued to like near faint all the time. And then at one point, I was getting a very minor procedure done, and they said, "Well, technically, this is a surgery, so we need you to get a physical." And when the blood work came back, the nurse called and said, "Your hemoglobin is deadly low." She says, "Go to the ER right now." And I did, and they tested it because they said, "We don't think it's that low. You wouldn't be conscious." And it was actually that low. And they said it must have been a slow bleed, and I just never noticed it. And as a result, I was conscious at a level that the average person wouldn't be. I immediately was in surgery, woke up the next day, third of my colon gone, and it wasn't much of an adjustment. I didn't get to process it, and so not much of any poetry came out of that. And it was mostly like I had a little PTSD around it, but I didn't have anything to process. And over the years, I get lots of scans and lots of checks. And one of the scans 2 or 3 years ago said, "Hey, um, the PET scan detected calcification of your prostate." And I said, "What's that?" And they said, "Well, it's basically where, it's beginning to calcify. It's often a signal that it's going to go cancerous." And I was like, "What can we do about it?" And they said, "Nothing, except continue to watch it." And of course, after the next 2 years, my PSA started going up, and they're just like, "Yeah, we're going to do a biopsy." And it came back that, I was in the very early stages of prostate cancer. The doctor said it wasn't aggressive. Take a year to figure out what you want to do, research it, and everything like that. But he recommended I have the prostate removed. And everything I researched online said at my stage of cancer, you would have the worst outcome if you did that. Both, sexual health, even cancer. The recurrence of cancer is higher cutting in there and removing it. And so he said, "Well, the reason I recommend this is because my partner doesn't have a lot of work right now, and he's the surgeon." And I was just like, that was the last time I saw that doctor. I immediately switched doctors. But I just couldn't believe that. And when I went to the new urologist, he's like, "So you were diagnosed by the other doctor, but you switched." And he goes, "Why?" And I said, "Because he recommended a prostate removal." And he pulled up my chart and he said, "At your stage?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Yeah, I would switch doctors too." He goes, "That's malpractice in my opinion." And I never say that about doctors. And so that was just the start of my experience with the medical community. One of the things I went through, the entire radiation was what I ended up choosing. And I went through that. I also went through hormone depletion, where they took my testosterone to zero, supposedly for 6 months, but it lasted for 13 months, where I was zero testosterone. The nurse told me when she gave me the shot to suppress my testosterone, she says, "A lot of people experience joint pain. It's very common, but it goes away." And as I was visiting my urologist, I would tell him about my joint pain. And at the year visit, he said, "I don't know why you keep bringing this up and you just don't go to a rheumatologist. I don't treat arthritis." And I said, "Well, it's joint pain because of the shot." And he goes, "What?" And I said, "Yeah, your nurse warned me that the shot can cause joint pain." And I looked it up, and about 2/3 of people get joint pain. And, of that, about half of them can be severe. And I would say mine's been pretty severe. And he goes, "I didn't know that." Because I guess I have a good nurse. And so that was another ding in the system. At no point did the doctors ever address my sexual orientation, whether, hey, I could have been married to a 21-year-old woman and planned on having kids. At no point did they say this treatment's going to make you sterile, but I had researched enough that I knew that. I just found the whole thing really strange. And I did have someone tell me, well, you signed something with the when you did the radiation that does, mentioned all that and absolved it. And I said, I never signed anything. And my partner who took me said, yeah, I was there every visit. He's never signed a thing other than handing a credit card for the copay. And so I just find that very interesting and strange. And, in addition, recently when I saw the radiation oncologist, I had mentioned to him that, ED's been a big problem since, but he had recommended, keep trying to work things down there because he says if you don't use it, you'll lose it. And in a couple of years, you will rebound to some stage. And so I told him, I said, well, I didn't realize you would never ejaculate again. And he's like, oh yeah, that's one of the things. And I said, but I do orgasm. And he said, what? And I said, I do have an orgasm. He goes, whoa. He goes, that's rare. Again, would have been nice to know, during the whole treatment that this is something, the general outcome is that part of you is lost. And I found lots of things throughout the whole process like that. I realized that when I had my fiducials surgically done, by looking on Reddit, that gay men especially shouldn't have anal sex or use toys or anything for 6 months. No one ever said anything to me about this. So I don't know if it's just malpractice or a lack of information and communication for everybody. Because again, I don't think maybe they knew because my glasses are always bright and colorful, but I don't know that they knew whether I was gay or straight. But I just found it very strange that there was just so many things that if I hadn't researched it, I wouldn't have known going into it. And I processed it. I took almost a whole year figuring out what I wanted to do and trying, first, some things that people recommended that were more alternative health. And I didn't see my PSA going down or anything. But in this case, I found poetry very useful because it was something I could log during this. It was a way of being like my diary and sharing and processing and all of these little things that we're going through. And it helped me make it to the other side of the treatment.
There's a lot to unpack there. One of the first things I want to address earlier on, you're talking about after your colon cancer diagnosis and surgery, you said that you didn't have really a lot of time to process and you kind of just felt like you were sitting with some PTSD. And I think there's often a societal pressure on men to be tough and strong and not ask for help or not really talk about the feelings of these things going through it. And because of that, historically, men have been more likely to avoid seeking medical attention. So instead of asking for help or seeking treatment, they push through the pain and assume it'll just go away. And it sounds like going from your colon cancer diagnosis to then going through the prostate cancer experience, you weren't afraid to kind of hold back and have the awkward or uncomfortable conversations, especially because, like you said, it seemed like the medical attention you were receiving didn't really factor in sexuality, one, for just anyone, but especially to a gay man. So kind of going off of that whole concept of men trying to be tough, avoiding seeking medical attention and trying to push through the pain, how did your diagnosis really challenge that notion?
I think that for me, the diagnosis, I came out gay very late in life. I came out gay in, I think, my senior year of college, and then went to graduate school doing my MFA. And I was in the Northern Virginia area in graduate school and DC, and it was a vibrant, great time in one respect to be out. And it was a scary time because of AIDS. And I saw what was happening to people. And I did get into a relationship and caught the person cheating. And I just decided at that point, I'm going in the closet. I am going to just, sequester myself. And I had my best friend in graduate school. And that's the person I ultimately married and had children with medical intervention. And she was the one who also urged me, I guess about 12 years to just go out. She's like, AIDS isn't what it used to be. You should go out and find someone. And so she encouraged me to do that. And, still my best friend, and we still, are great. But I just cut that part of my life off for, a couple of decades. And, to come out and have a sex life and be vibrant, and then boom, you have this and everything shut down. It feels like um, it feels like a door slamming when it feels like I just opened so recently, and so it's been difficult, but I also feel like it's I did get to come out. I did get to find my partner. I did get to, establish ourselves, and we have an intimacy that, is beyond the physical. And, we'll get around this or through this and, the way that we do. But it has been hard. It has been hard processing this because I haven't seen other people really talking about it outside of like small little Reddit groups online and things like that. There's a lot of, lack of discussion about it. Someone in California mentioned, didn't you join a local prostate cancer group? And I went online and looked and called around. There wasn't any. They go, oh, we have them for, just, people suffering different types of cancers. And we also have some that are just general cancers. But she says, I don't think anybody with prostate cancer actually goes to those. And I was just like, it's like people, I think colon cancer and prostate cancer, people just sort of don't talk about it very often or do much. And, in the case of colon cancer, for most people, it's one of the most easily treated types of cancer. And so I encourage people to go out and get a screening. You never know. And in my case, I wish the doctor had done the blood work 6 months earlier when I originally went in. But it is one of these things that I think that there needs to be more openness and more willingness to talk about things like this. It's not. There's no finality that I thought there would be. I thought, prostate cancer meant the end of my sex life, and it meant the end of my relationship and all this stuff. And it isn't. It's just different, and things are not ideal, but they're not bad. And, navigating that, especially if I had a community to talk to, I think would be better. And I've since I've been so out and open about it. I've had lots of people tell me, "Oh yeah, my dad had that," and my neighbor has that, and and it's like all these people suffering, and no one really knew outside their close knit family, and they're not, they processed it alone. And I know that what I went through, I I get to share it through poetry, and I got to process it through my words. And I fear and feel for the people who have just processed this themselves and with their, children and spouses, and that's it.
Taking it a step further, how did your identity as a gay man shape your experience with illness, and in what ways did it challenge your understanding of masculinity?
Um, well, the prostate cancer has been a gut punch. I think it would have been less so if I was a bottom, but I'm not. So it has been it's made me feel insecure in myself, and I have to get over that. But I think that it's allowed me to appreciate what I do have. It's allowed me to also make efforts to, get the word out to other people. I've been surprised at some of what I considered risque poems that have been picked up by very big, large journals, poetry journals and literary journals, that they're willing to take a chance on stuff that is just so in your face, and it's about a subject matter, and the way I approach it, often with a lot of humor. I've just been surprised how open it is, and I've gotten a lot of great responses from people, about it, and I feel like it's something that nobody else that I'm aware of is writing about it or talking about it, and so I kind of feel like this is my this is my purpose now a little bit to communicate around it and get people to know that it's okay to discuss this. It's okay to talk about it. I'm also going to make sure that my urologist that I currently have and my radiation oncologist get a copy of the book and a letter, and just say, hey, as a gay man, this has been my experience, and we can do better. And this isn't an indictment on you personally. But I think that them being men also makes it difficult for them to bring up topics and talk about things. But I kind of think it's necessary. And I think that, people should be better informed going into this.
And what do you wish more gay men and men in general understood about prostate cancer and their general health?
I don't know how true this is or not, but one of the things that the doctors told me is, you know, during the calcification of my prostate, they said, this is not due to your colon cancer, but fortunately the scans are picking it up. Have you ever taken vitamin D? And I'm like, yeah, I've taken it for 30 years because I was told I had low vitamin D. And they said, are you taking it with vitamin K? And I said, no. And around 3 years ago, I noticed everybody's now putting vitamin D and vitamin K together. And one of the doctors says that if your vitamin D is low, taking vitamin D helps, but your body doesn't know where to put the vitamin D. That's what vitamin K does. It directs it. And they said, vitamin D without vitamin K, the vitamin D doesn't know where to go, and it often can accumulate in certain organs, especially the prostate, and cause calcification. I've looked online. I haven't been able to confirm that, but that's what one doctor told me. So anybody out there taking vitamin D, make sure it's got vitamin K. And fortunately, when I looked recently, almost all of them do. But for 30 years, I took it, and I don't know if that led to it, but also, someone 53, 54 is very early to get prostate cancer. Maybe I probably still would have gotten it in 15 years or 10 years, but at my age, it's very early. And so it is possible that just taking vitamin D without the vitamin K, went to it. But we don't know. I also saw a couple people saying this is a theory online, but there's no studies because there's no magic patented pill that will come out at the end of it. And so it's just one of these things that makes sense that we know we're putting vitamin K in it today so that it will direct the vitamin D. And I was like, well, obviously if it's not directed, the theory that it is accumulating in organs makes sense. So I don't know if there's something to that. But I feel like there's a lot of research that, continues should be done. Young people are getting colon cancer like crazy now. It used to be that they wouldn't even, recommend a colonoscopy until you were much older. And, there I was at the time, I guess I was 47. And, I was at an age where they wouldn't recommend it. And I had colon cancer. And I'm seeing other people in their 30s and other people, part of that may be diet, part of it may be chemicals that are in our foods and stuff like that. But I would just say, I know gay men, there is a part of the gay culture that is very aware of fitness and muscles and stuff like that. But I also think that there's an aspect of supplements and nutrition that we have to be sort of careful about and mindful of going into. And, sometimes I wished I hadn't taken vitamin D for 30 years, but, you can't go back.
And seeking healthcare can also be intimidating for queer people due to the fear of being discriminated against. So what were your experiences like with that?
So I don't feel that I was ultimately discriminated against being gay, but I also felt like at times I didn't know the lack of communication and being informed, whether it was something that they were derelict in for all their patients or just me. And I hadn't shared with the urologist or the radiation oncologist that I was gay. It just didn't come up. But, at the time, I think I was wearing my rainbow glasses. These are pink ones. So I still think that it was probably obvious, but maybe not. But, I just feel that, you never know. But I suspect that based on what I hear from other people, everybody's sort of being misinformed and that a lot of people aren't being told what to expect and what the outcomes are.
And switching gears a little bit, you had mentioned that there were some online spaces like Reddit forums that provided a little bit of community or more specific information regarding what a queer person could experience while going through this. Did you find that queer spaces held room for conversations about illness and men's health, or did you feel a need to create that space through your work?
I felt I had to create it through my work. I didn't see it online. I did a lot of searches, especially when someone in California had mentioned, "Hey, join a local prostate cancer group." Didn't find any around here, and so I I did a lot of searches, and what I found was, there was talks in Reddit, but again, it was usually led by 3 or 4 people, and probably about a dozen people commenting and stuff like that. So it wasn't a big, giant, vibrant community, and some of the things were years old, so it wasn't also like it was timely. Like these are people talking today in a very current chat, but I'm very thankful they're still there, and I was able to find the information.
And that kind of is a nice transition into your project, Glandscapes. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? And what was the moment that inspired you to begin writing Glandscapes? And when did you realize that poetry could hold the weight of this experience?
So I was writing about it just as it was happening. It felt necessary. I've been writing poetry for the last 5 years, regularly, and I just found it was I could not write about it. It was the most pressing thing on my mind. It was the anxiety. What am I going to do? I did so much research online. I looked at so many studies and the outcomes of studies of, treatments at certain stages of cancer, and deciding, what to do. I went to a lot of doctors and talked about different options and things like that and explored them. And I guess at the end of the day, I did feel empowered, because I did research it, and I did kind of suspect what I wanted to do, but I still wanted to talk to other people and get other people's opinions and stuff like that. I didn't feel any pressure from anybody. And like I said, the doctor had originally told me you could take a year with this, and the second urologist agreed. He's like, "Yeah, it's not an aggressive prostate cancer. Those are usually pretty rare, but you have to decide sooner rather than later. It doesn't get better." And so, I felt like having so much time was a luxury, but it was also a constant worry. And I also think that looming worry helped me stay and process and write and continue to share my journey. I think that if I had just gone from diagnosis to treatment, we again would have had the PTSD without the processing. And I do think it was a gift that I had that year to spend with my lover, and explore each other physically, knowing that things were going to be different. And I also got to write about it. It was a beautiful period. It was also a very anxiety driven period, but it allowed me to write the book and put it together, and sort of lament and grieve for what I was going to lose, and also share what was happening and what the outcome was.
How did writing about physical transformation experienced through your illness impact your relationship with your own body? And did your identity as a gay man offer a different lens on that?
I think that it did. I mean, but not in the way that you would expect. I I knew that they said you're going to gain weight when the testosterone was completely suppressed to zero. Women still have more testosterone than I had a year later in their blood work. I didn't realize women had testosterone, but yeah. And, you know, of course, no sex drive with that, gained weight. I was also a little depressed and anxiety ridden. And so I gained 70 pounds from February of 2024 to now, which was the period of I was treated with radiation in February 2024, and that's when they gave me the shot that ended up lasting a year instead of 6 months. They have a 1 year shot. I don't know what would have happened if I'd gotten that, but my testosterone in February of this year was still Neil. It's coming back now, and I definitely can feel I'm better. My joints don't ache and hurt like they did, but you know, and I've in February of this year I said, enough feeling sorry for yourself. You packed on some pounds that you were going to with the testosterone going down, but a lot of this was you feeling sorry for yourself. So I started being mindful of what I was eating. You would think as you're being treated for cancer, you'd eat your best, and I didn't. So in February of this year, I started eating more mindfully, and I'm down 50 pounds, and I still have a little ways to go. But it was a time where I was grieving and I was sad, and I turned to food, and it was part of this journey as well. It's not something I've written about. The eating and stuff like that. I find that just a very difficult to process on the page because I have a very complicated relationship with food. Yo-yo dieting and everything else over the years from a pudgy little kid on up. But there's probably poems around that at some point that I'll process and write as well. As far as my identity as a gay man, I don't know that it's changed. I think that I'm more informed now. I feel I'm more appreciative of people processing things and going through things. I also look at people and I don't jump to conclusions as much as I used to. If someone, is having a bad day or snapping at you, you don't know what is going on in the back end. And I recognize that because I lashed out a little bit, during my treatment and my processing. And, when I apologized to people and said, I'm just going through some stuff, they had no idea. They said, you look fine. I didn't know you had this. And I was like, yeah, I didn't put it on Facebook. I didn't put it on LinkedIn. I didn't share to the world that, hey, I've got cancer and I'm processing this and all my joints ache and hurt. And every day feels like a struggle. But I went through it. And so I think I have a little more grace towards others now and a little more appreciation for people going through things. My grandmother had terrible arthritis and I never really appreciated it until this past year of my joints aching and hurting so bad. I felt a real kinship towards my grandmother during that period because I remember at times her elbows would hurt so much she would just lean into herself and just wince. And I felt those moments and I felt very close to her. And I wished I had known what that was like at the time because I think I being a child and seeing that I didn't respect it or appreciate what she was going through. And I didn't give her probably the love and the care that I probably should have given her.
Obviously, prostate cancer is a heavy subject, but in spite of that, your poetry also provides moments of unexpected humor. So what role do you believe humor plays in confronting mortality?
I think humor is sort of a necessary thing. I think that, cancer and mortality and, even the fact that, this may not be death, but death is there all, lurking at all times. I tell people, are you worried about the prostate cancer? It's like, no, I wasn't worried about the colon cancer. I wasn't worried about the prostate cancer. I'm worried about the next thing. I feel like, I don't know if there's another one in there waiting to emerge, but, I am continuing to get monitored and hopefully if something happens, we'll see it. But I do worry about that. But I feel that humor allows you to deal with it. I mean, sometimes things are so awful and terrible. The healthiest thing you can do is sort of poke fun at it. And there's a bit of absurdity in these terrible things. And I feel like humor is a tool that I didn't know you could put in poetry, and I discovered it during the pandemic. There was a poetry anthology that came out, and I discovered this poet, Dorothy Chan, and she was the funniest poet I'd ever heard. And she talked about these, things that are just like, as being bisexual and dealing with, family and all these other things where you go through these terrible things. And, she just had such a sense of humor about it. And it felt real, and it felt like an honest reaction. And I just said, this is what I'm going to use as a tool talking about cancer. I don't want to have this book be a woe is me book. This is a book that both grieves and deals with the heavy stuff, but it also deals with it in a way that also has celebration and humor and life and optimism. And I think that it's something that is complicated, and I think humor plays an important part for me in processing it. And I think that's also a very natural way.
And earlier on, you mentioned that you're also a father. So, what conversations about identity, family, and inheritance came up as you navigated your health journey?
So I think the big thing is I've told my children, you have to be in charge of your health. I had a doctor dismiss me near fainting, and I just accepted it without blood work. And as a patient, you can insist on blood work. You could go to the urgent care, but I didn't. I just felt like I didn't have the agency to do that. So I've told my children, yeah, and I've told them, hey, when it comes to colon cancer, it's in your genetics now. Don't wait until you're in your 50s to get treated. There's things you can do before then that maybe aren't a colonoscopy, but you should do things like that. And I think that, empowering them around their healthcare is really important, because at the end of the day, the one thing I've noticed about it is if you don't pick up the pieces and dot the I's and cross the T's, they're not going to do it. And otherwise, if I had just been as passive with the first urologist as I was with my primary care physician who dismissed my fainting, I would have had probably my prostate surgically removed and probably been at a higher recurrence incident rate of prostate cancer because of it. And all because there's a doctor, a surgeon in his practice who has hours to fill and probably maybe a boat payment to make. I don't know. But it was not, and so those are the types of things I've also, talked to them about, the fact that, we never know how long we've got. And you just have to, don't put everything off. If you have dreams, go ahead and do them now. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there and be vulnerable. Their dad is writing about prostate cancer in a book, and he's writing about his sex life and stuff like that. And that's like, whoa. I mean, they're adult children, but I think that I know that other parents are doing that, and so that they're seeing a world that is a little bit different because of me, and hopefully they're not going to be as isolated and hopefully more willing to talk about these types of things as they come up in their life.
And what advice would you offer someone in the LGBTQ plus community who's navigating illness?
I would say research as much as you can. There's so much medical research, and I found a lot of studies that I couldn't read, but I did ask doctors, and they were able to get them for me. And so, if that's the route that you want to take, because I was really all in with alternative health at first. And I had a doctor who was able to get me some studies. And there was one with, what is that? So this people take melatonin study that looks so promising for hormonal cancers, of which prostate was. And so I did that for a few months, very high doses melatonin. And people were like, you don't fall asleep. And it turns out melatonin only works when the lights are out, that you get sleepy. And so I would take 3,000, 4,000, whatever the dosage was in the morning. And despite the promising results in a very small clinical study, it didn't work for me. But I was very informed. I took probably the most active role I've ever taken in anything. And, and I knew what the treatments were, and I knew what treatment I would do if the melatonin treatment didn't work. And unfortunately, I don't know that there will ever be a bigger study than that one for melatonin, because at the end of the day, it's melatonin. It's something we could just buy over the counter. And unfortunately, our medical research world is mostly fueled by patents and drugs and pharmaceutical companies that can turn it into millions of dollars and things like that. So and that's also a little sad, disheartening, because I think that we will not know in a lot of cases about more natural and treatments and alternative health treatments, because I just don't think the clinical studies will ever get done. But that one was a decent study that had been done on it and looked promising. It worked really well with what is it? Oh, I think it was ovarian cancer. But the assumption was that prostate cancer being hormonal, the results would be similar. But for me, it didn't. But there's different things out there that people can do. But absent that, at the end of the day, medical intervention is sometimes needed, and I'm not certainly not one of those people that's against that. I just wanted to try everything I could short of basically terminating the prostate.
And connecting it back to the tarot, the Five of Cups, again, this card signifying that we're experiencing grief and sadness, and it's important that we allow ourselves to feel those feelings. Especially with the card's feminine energy, we really need to take the time to look inwards to see what we need for ourselves. And in doing so, that prevents us from falling into the trap of perpetual self-wallowing. Like Mickie talked about today, there was a lot going on, and at sometimes he did not have all the time he needed to process, and he sat with some PTSD almost. And he learned that wallowing and feeling sorry for himself wouldn't help him in the long run. And he was really able to reflect inward to see what he needed and turn that sadness and grief into a beautiful creative project. And in doing so, he's fostering authentic and extremely vulnerable conversations that I think a lot of us could benefit from, because even though these might be topics that people don't typically talk about, they are still things that people are experiencing. So for any grief we may be feeling in our own lives, whether that's through a medical diagnosis or a breakup or just a general hardship, it's important that we're in touch with those feelings and that we give ourselves time to grieve and time to listen to what we need. So that way we can find that healthy path forward to move on from the sadness and try to find the optimism in life. Because remember, no pain will last forever, and we can move on to brighter days ahead. Well, Mickie, thank you again so much for coming on today. This was a great episode. As we're coming to the end of this discussion, can you read us an excerpt from Glandscapes?
Sure. This one is kind of an elegy for someone I lost during this. And it's called When I Heard of Your Death. When I heard of your death, the sky folded, clouds stacked like white towels. I sat on the ledge of a rocky outcrop and stared at the Pacific's dull vacancy until my eyes hurt, and I thought of you. You back then when we were dead together, chancing our hands in the dingy theater in the shopping center where your mom bought her fancy cannoli. Safe in the dark, new to lust. Later, when we stumbled inside your room, searching for mouths, for more, I opened my throat to tell you something, a trumpet in a black plastic case against the wall. A week before you were dead, you looked dead already. Your skin peppered with dried sweat, the texture of delicate paper, the color of stingray. Now my blood no longer obeys my heart, moving with the moon's tidal pull, and my heart isn't a heart, a fist of gristle. When I'm dead, a call will go out, and you will recognize the static, and will speak as the dead speak, two corpses colliding in the lit dark. Not old men, not quite young, our bodies roiling with rot and stink, the mat of my arm fused to your gelatinous back, the cursed wet lump of us. And what was once my throat will open, and what was once your ear will listen, and we will turn our wasting flesh into a death cottage. And in the cottage I will read Rimbaud in bed, and you will reach out to smooth my cheek, what used to be my cheek.
That was an excerpt from Glandscapes by Mickie Kennedy. Mickie, thank you again so much for coming on today. I really appreciate this and your openness and authenticity. As we're wrapping up here, can you tell all the listeners where they can learn more about you, where they can purchase Glandscapes? Please plug all the things.
Yeah, sure. So on socials, I'm at Mickie Poet, and it's Mickie. And my website is Mickie Kennedy, Mickie Kennedy, Kennedy. And you can get to Glandscapes by just going to Glandscapes.com, and it's landscapes with a G at the beginning. It's a play on glands and landscapes. And again, that's Glandscapes.com, and they'll take you to where you'll be able to buy it through Button Poetry.
And all that information will be included in the show notes, so definitely check it out once you're done listening. And you know the drill. For any questions or feedback, please reach out to me, rob@ajadedgay.com. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. 5 stars only. I greatly appreciate it. For more information on this topic, our guest, episode resources, blog posts, merchandise, socials, all that fun stuff, you can visit the website at jadedgay.com. You can connect with the podcast on Instagram, TikTok, SoundCloud, and YouTube at @ajadedgaypod. You can follow me personally, Rob Loveless, on Instagram at Rob_Loveless. Also, if you're feeling generous, consider supporting the podcast on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. That gets you instant access to episodes ad-free, a day early, plus exclusive monthly bonus content. Or if you just want to access the monthly bonus episodes, you can purchase them for $3 each. And if you're scared of commitment, don't worry, I get it. You can make a one-time donation on Buy Me a Coffee for any dollar amount, and both the Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee are at @ajadedgaypod. And remember, every day is all we have, so you gotta make your own happiness. Bye.